What if the very thing you've been told to do, the thing everyone swears will get them to notice you again, is actually keeping you stuck, powerless, and invisible? You've probably heard it 100 times. Just go no contact. Cut them off. Vanish. Let silence do the work. And in theory, it sounds powerful. It sounds like control. But deep down, you can feel something's not right. Because while you're waiting in silence, hoping they notice, you're also hurting, wondering if they ever even cared. You're not healing. You're holding your breath. And here's the truth no one wants to admit. No contact only works if they're still emotionally invested. If they're already detaching, your silence isn't mysterious. It's just nothing. You deserve better than to sit in the dark, waiting for someone else to remember you. You weren't born to shrink into silence. You were made to rise, and that's exactly why this moment matters. Right now, you have the power to do something far more effective than disappearing. You have the power to create change, not by vanishing, but by evolving. You don't win this by hiding. You win this by becoming someone unforgettable. Not to prove your worth to them, but to remember it for yourself. Silence isn't power when it comes from pain. Power is when you stand tall, when you rebuild, when you show, not them, but yourself, that you're capable of rising no matter what tried to break you. No contact gives the illusion of control, but what it often does is keep you stuck in a waiting game, obsessing over their reaction instead of focusing on your own transformation. And here's what they don't tell you. Real impact doesn't come from silence. It comes from signals, unexpected signals of strength. Signals that say, I've changed, I've grown, I've let go. Not in bitterness, not in games, but in clarity, in peace, in purpose. You want them to notice? Don't disappear. Evolve. Let them feel the shift. Let them see the calm in your energy, the focus in your life, the glow in your actions, not because you want to prove anything, but because you've outgrown the version of yourself who needed to. And when that happens, everything changes. Not just how they see you, but how you see you. Stay with this message, because what comes next will give you a strategy more powerful than anything you've heard before. It's not about cutting off someone else. It's about reconnecting with your own power. It's about stepping out of the shadows and becoming the version of yourself you were always meant to be. The kind that doesn't chase, the kind that doesn't wait, the kind that leads. If you've been stuck in silence, frozen by fear, hoping they'll notice, this is your wake-up call. The real comeback isn't in being quiet. It's in becoming undeniable. And once you understand how to do that, they won't just remember you. They won't see you coming. The reason most people never regain their power after heartbreak isn't because they're weak. It's because they're waiting for permission to let go, waiting for a sign, waiting for closure, waiting for the other person to realize what they lost. But that wait becomes a trap. And what you don't realize is while you're stuck in that loop, your mind is quietly feeding on the absence. You start thinking silence will somehow deliver clarity, that distance will speak for you. But silence without transformation doesn't echo. It fades. That's why the strategy you need isn't withdrawal. It's redirection. Not away from them, but toward yourself. You are the one who holds the key to change. And that change begins when you stop needing them to validate your pain. There's a deeper level of strength few people ever tap into. The strength of signaling peace, growth, and clarity when they least expect it. The strength of responding to heartbreak, not with retreat, but with rebirth. Not to prove a point, but because you finally see that their opinion no longer defines your worth. Most people don't see that coming. They expect you to chase, to break down, to cling. They expect desperation. And when you don't give them what they're bracing for, when you rise in a way they never predicted, you completely disrupt their emotional pattern. Human psychology is wired for familiarity. The brain builds emotional shortcuts based on how someone used to act. So when you suddenly stop being the wounded version they remember and start becoming a grounded, calm, emotionally elevated version of yourself, their brain can't make sense of it. It creates emotional tension, curiosity, reevaluation, not because you manipulated anything, but because you grew beyond the role they cast you in. You're no longer the person who needed their attention. You're the one who found something far more powerful, your own emotional alignment. This is where the shift begins, not in silence, but in presence. Your presence, your energy, your focus. Every small action you take toward rebuilding your mindset is a message sent without words. Every boundary you set, every moment you choose peace over panic, every time you redirect your thoughts to the future instead of the past, that's a signal You don't have to speak to be heard. You don't have to beg to be felt. Your transformation is the message. And when you live from that place, not pretending, not forcing, but becoming, you break every unspoken rule they thought would keep you down. You were never meant to fade into silence. You were meant to rise so fully into who you are that they don't just miss you. They question who they ever were to lose you. You don't need revenge. You don't need recognition. What you need is to feel the power of becoming untouchable, not by force, but by evolution. That's the signal they'll never see coming. And it's already inside you, waiting to be claimed. There's something undeniable about the moment you stop trying to be understood and start becoming undeniable. That's when everything shifts. That's when you step out of the emotional trap they left you in and reclaim your power. Not by asking for it back, but by becoming the version of you that never needed their permission in the first place. You stop reacting. You stop waiting. You stop hoping they'll realize your worth. Because now, you've already realized it yourself. And that realization, pure, grounded, and internal, is what creates the emotional reversal they never see coming. When someone expects you to be broken and you show up healed, it confuses their certainty. They remember you as the one who needed reassurance, the one who couldn't walk away, the one who would always wait. So when they feel calm in your voice, purpose in your actions, and peace in your silence, it forces them to reprocess the story they told themselves. Emotional reversal doesn't come from pretending to be okay. It comes from becoming okay, from doing the hard, honest internal work that turns your pain into power. And that power is magnetic. The human brain is constantly trying to close emotional loops. When something ends without clarity, the mind replays it over and over, trying to make sense of it. But when you re-enter their awareness in a state they didn't predict, stronger, lighter, freer, it disrupts that loop. It replaces their memory of you with a new image, a new emotion, a new energy. That contrast creates curiosity. Curiosity leads to reflection, and reflection leads to regret, not because you chased them, but because you outgrew them. Emotional growth is louder than any words you could say. It's louder than anger, louder than silence. It carries a weight, a presence, a shift in how people feel when they think of you. That shift doesn't come from pretending to be over it. It comes from choosing to heal in a way that doesn't center around them at all. Your healing becomes your rebellion. Your peace becomes your statement, not out of spite, but because you finally understand that your future deserves more than your past ever offered. And here's the part that hits deepest. When you stop being the person who craved their validation, you become the person they're not prepared to face. Not because you hurt them, but because you grew beyond the version of yourself they once had power over. That's the version they remember. That's the version they assumed would never change. But now you've changed everything. You've reversed the roles, not through manipulation, but through mastery. Mastery of your emotions, mastery of your attention, mastery of your energy. This is the new standard, not hoping they'll see you differently, becoming someone they have to see differently. Because the person they once knew, that version no longer exists. And what stands in your place now is someone they never expected, but someone the world needs to see. Keep going. You're not done yet. You don't attract people back by becoming louder. You attract them back by becoming clearer, clear in your energy, clear in your direction, clear in who you are becoming. The world doesn't respond to noise. It responds to signals, quiet, strong, undeniable signals of transformation. When you stop trying to be noticed and start becoming impossible to ignore, everything changes. Because energy doesn't lie, and people can feel when yours has shifted from chaos to calm, from lack to purpose, from trying to get someone back to trying to get yourself back. The shift doesn't need to be announced. You don't need to post it, prove it, or package it. It's felt, it's sensed, and it's powerful. The ones who underestimated you, who thought you'd spiral or stay stuck, suddenly feel something different, something they can't quite explain. That's the mirror effect. When your growth becomes a reflection of everything they chose not to become, it creates quiet discomfort, not because you attack them, but because your evolution exposes their stagnation. And they can feel it. They can feel the distance between who you used to be and who you're becoming. That emotional gap creates gravity. People are drawn to growth even when they don't admit it, especially when they can't match it. They may not say it, but they notice it in your words, in your silence, in the way you no longer seek their attention to feel complete. And that's the part that begins to shift the balance, because now you're not reaching for them, You're reaching for something higher. And in doing so, you become what they lost, not just who they left. This isn't about being better than anyone else. It's about being better than you were. It's about choosing to become your future, instead of replaying your past. And when you move with that intention, that quiet inner fire, people feel it, even if they're not in your life anymore, especially if they're not. Because now you've become a silent reminder of what they didn't value. And that kind of reminder doesn't scream. It radiates. You are no longer the same. And you never will be. Because once you've tasted clarity, confusion becomes unbearable. Once you've found direction, distractions lose their power. And once you've discovered what it means to evolve, not for someone else but for yourself, you never go back to chasing crumbs. You build the whole table. That's the level you're stepping into. That's the energy you're learning to hold. Not because someone came back, but because you came back to you. This is where real confidence lives. Not in perfection, not in proving, but in progress. Quiet, unstoppable progress. The kind that doesn't ask permission. The kind that doesn't need validation. The kind that walks into every room, every moment, every memory with a calm certainty. I've changed and I'm not turning back. This is your new power. Don't speak it, live it. And let the energy speak for itself. When your energy changes, your world responds. Not right away, or not loudly, but inevitably. Because growth is not invisible. Even when it's quiet, it's felt. Even when it's unannounced, it's undeniable. The people who once overlooked you start noticing, not because you chase, not because you explain, but because you become. You become the version of yourself that they never thought you'd actually become. The one who doesn't just survive the storm, but learns how to command it. Most people live their lives in emotional reaction. They wait to feel good until someone returns. They wait to feel whole until someone approves. But waiting is surrender. It keeps you emotionally frozen in a moment that already ended. The ones who truly move forward are the ones who realize they don't need to wait for healing. They choose it. They don't need permission to rise, they decide to. That decision, fully owned, fully felt, is what changes everything. You can't influence what you still need to escape from. You can't transform if you're still holding on to who you were when they left. There is no growth in pretending you've moved on. There's only power in actually doing it. The world responds to who you are being, not who you want to be. And when you begin showing up as the person who's no longer stuck in past pain, you shift your reality. Not because they came back, but because you did. The most powerful move you can make isn't to convince them. It's to confuse them with peace, with direction, with calm certainty. That's the part they don't expect. That's what turns silence from emptiness into elegance. When you're no longer fighting for their attention, you begin attracting everything that matches your new frequency. That includes opportunities. That includes joy. That includes relationships built on alignment, not attachment. They will feel it before they see it. Your new energy will hit differently. It won't beg. It won't chase. It will simply exist, boldly, freely, unapologetically. You won't need to say you've changed. It will be written in the way you speak, the way you walk, the way you show up in your own life. Not louder, clearer, not prouder, more peaceful. That's the mark of real transformation. It doesn't seek reaction. It radiates identity. This isn't about closing the door on them. It's about opening the one within you. The one that leads to everything you almost forgot you deserved. Love, clarity, depth, peace. You can't walk through that door carrying who you used to be. You have to leave the pain behind. Not because it didn't matter, but because it taught you enough. Now you carry the lesson, not the weight. That's the version of you the world is waiting to meet. And that's the version they'll never forget. Let your next move be this. No more shrinking. No more proving. Just growing. So boldly, so deeply that even silence becomes unforgettable. You don't rise by hoping they notice. You rise by becoming someone so aligned, so grounded, so deeply at peace that their attention no longer holds value. The real shift doesn't happen when they reach out. It happens when you no longer need them to. That's when you know you've crossed over. Not into bitterness, not into pretending, but into true emotional sovereignty, into the place where your sense of self is no longer up for negotiation, where your focus is no longer trapped in waiting for a return that may never come. Because now you've returned to yourself. You were never just trying to get them back. You were trying to feel whole again. You were trying to reconnect with the part of you that got buried in the pain. That part of you never left. It just got quiet. It's still there, beneath the noise, beneath the longing, beneath the questions that never got answered. And now, you're strong enough to hear it again. Strong enough to lead with it. That voice is calm. That voice is wise. That voice doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't need to be chosen, because it already knows you are enough. This is your power, not in becoming who they miss, but in becoming who you missed. That version of you before the overthinking, before the emotional chaos, before the identity was wrapped around someone else's approval. That version still lives in you, waiting for you to breathe life back into it. You don't have to fix the past. You just have to choose who you want to be now, not out of reaction, but out of vision. Not to impress them, but to reclaim yourself. When you become centered, you stop giving your energy away to people who don't know what to do with it. You stop checking, wondering, replaying. You stop creating fantasy connections with someone who already showed you they weren't ready for your depth, not because you've hardened, but because you've elevated. And the higher you rise, the quieter everything below becomes. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer defines you. The beauty of becoming is that it doesn't depend on them at all. Whether they come back or stay silent, your path remains the same. Forward, focused, free. And that's what creates the unexpected impact. That's what hits different. When they realize you didn't just survive, you transformed, you transcended, you evolved beyond the version they left. And now you carry something they can't reach. Not because you pushed them away, but because they never chose to grow with you. Let that be your motivation. Not to seek revenge, not to trigger regret, but to walk fully into the version of yourself that never needed external permission to shine. You were never waiting for them. You were waiting for you. And now that you've arrived, nothing can stop you. Let the world feel your shift. Let your energy lead. The comeback isn't loud. It's unshakable. Keep becoming. They won't see it coming, but you will. The greatest shift happens when you stop measuring your growth by their reaction. When you no longer look back to see if they're watching. When your progress is no longer a performance, but a promise to yourself. That's when your evolution becomes permanent. You're not healing to be seen, you're healing to be free. Because freedom is the real goal. Not their validation, not their return, not their remorse, just freedom. The kind that can't be taken away because it was never built on anyone else. There's a deep kind of peace that enters your life when you stop needing closure. When you stop chasing answers from people who were never capable of giving them. You learn that your peace doesn't require permission. It's a choice, a practice, a daily decision to no longer carry what was never yours to hold. You stop keeping your heart on pause. You stop defining your days by who reaches out and who doesn't. Your mind becomes your sanctuary. Your emotions become your responsibility. That's when you begin to experience real power. Not the kind that forces anything, but the kind that attracts everything. People feel energy long before they understand it. They don't just notice what you say, they feel how you've changed. And when that change is genuine, when it comes from a place of inner stability, it's unforgettable. You don't need to show them what they lost. Life will do that on its own. What you need to show is what you've gained, without ever needing to say a word. Show it in your stillness. Show it in your discipline. Show it in your boundaries. Show it in the fact that you no longer abandon yourself for anyone. You've outgrown emotional scarcity. You no longer confuse chaos with passion. You no longer settle for being remembered when you were made to be respected. You've stopped watering dead soil. And now everything in you is starting to bloom. Not because someone returned, but because you did. Your presence now carries weight. Not because it demands attention, but because it stands on truth. Quiet truth, solid truth. Truth that doesn't move with every wave. Let them wonder. Let them feel the shift. Let them sit in the silence that once belonged to you and realize what they thought they'd always have is no longer within reach. But don't do it for them. Do it for the you who stayed loyal when no one else did. The you who kept going even when it hurt. The you who refused to give up even when your heart was breaking. That version of you deserves the life that's waiting on the other side of this moment. You don't need closure. You don't need revenge. You don't even need them to understand. You just need to keep rising, keep becoming, keep walking. The most powerful move you'll ever make is choosing yourself so fully, so completely, that nothing they do can ever pull you back. Let your energy become your answer. Let your evolution become the echo. There is nothing more magnetic than someone who is no longer emotionally available to the past. When you stop keeping old wounds open just to remind yourself of how deeply you once felt, you begin to realize that healing was never about forgetting. It was about reclaiming your time, your energy, your worth. Every moment you choose not to revisit what broke you is a moment you invest in what builds you. And every time you do, your frequency rises. Not because you're pretending to be healed, but because you're finally choosing peace over pain and presence over memory. When they cross your mind, and they will, it doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. But what matters most is what you do with that moment. Do you let it pull you backward, or do you use it as a reminder of how far you've come? The thoughts may visit, but they don't get to stay, because you no longer live in that version of yourself. You've shifted, you've upgraded, and the emotional space they once occupied is now filled with clarity, strength, and direction. Let them wonder why your silence feels different now. It's not the silence of heartbreak, it's the silence of elevation, the silence that follows deep work, long nights, and unshakable decisions. You're not quiet because you're broken. You're quiet because you're building. And building takes energy. Energy you no longer waste trying to be understood by someone who never valued the depth of your heart. That's the kind of silence that speaks louder than anything you could say. It's the kind that radiates confidence, not arrogance, clarity, not bitterness, alignment. You're becoming someone who doesn't just survive pain, but turns it into power. Someone who doesn't just move on, but moves up. And in that space, everything shifts. People who once felt secure in your presence now feel the weight of your absence. Not because you're trying to hurt them, but because you're no longer shrinking yourself to stay available for someone who left. You've reclaimed your seat, you've reclaimed your voice, and most of all, you've reclaimed your peace. This is where your new story begins. Not the one where they come back and finally see your value, but the one where you stop needing them to. You stop waiting for recognition and start living from self-respect. You stop counting losses and start counting lessons. Because every piece of pain you've carried has been fuel, and now it's burning into something beautiful, something powerful, something permanent. You didn't come this far to look back. You didn't suffer just to stay the same. You're here to become something greater than the version of you they left behind. That version served its purpose. It taught you what you needed to learn. Now it's time to rise above it. Quietly, powerfully, unapologetically. Your evolution is your closure, and your growth is the only answer that matters now. Keep becoming, keep rising. They'll feel it. Even in your silence, you're not hard to love. You just outgrew the spaces that couldn't hold you. And once you realize that, everything shifts. You stop trying to shrink yourself to fit into someone's limited view of your worth. You stop questioning your depth just because someone else was too shallow to receive it. You stop editing your heart to be digestible for people who never knew how to handle truth. You begin to understand that your healing isn't a reaction, it's a revelation. And that revelation changes the entire game. This version of you no longer exists for validation. You don't need to be liked. You don't need to be missed. You don't need to be proven right. You've evolved past the point of needing an audience for your growth, because real growth is quiet, it's steady, it's unseen by most. But its impact is undeniable. You carry yourself differently. You speak from a deeper place. You no longer respond to triggers that once controlled you. That's power, that's peace, that's freedom earned, not given. You're building something far more meaningful than a comeback. You're building an identity rooted in truth, in wholeness, in self-respect. And when that becomes your foundation, everything external loses its grip. You no longer chase what doesn't align. You no longer beg for energy that drains you. You no longer argue with people committed to misunderstanding you, because you know who you are now, and no one can take that from you. Not anymore. You've broken the pattern, the one that told you to wait, the one that told you to chase, the one that taught you to make yourself smaller just to be chosen. That cycle ends with you. You've risen above it. And the world can feel that shift, whether they admit it or not. They sense that the old version of you, the one who would have done anything just to be seen, is gone. And what stands in their place now is someone they can't define, someone they can't control, someone they no longer have access to. You no longer fight to be remembered. You choose to be unforgettable through presence, purpose, and peace. Through the way you now move, unshaken, focused, whole. The kind of energy that doesn't need to prove anything because it's already aligned with everything it seeks. You've stepped into a frequency that not everyone can follow, and that's okay. You're not for everyone. You were never meant to be. Let this be your reminder. The goal was never to get them back. The goal was to get you back. And you've done that. You're doing that. Every single day you choose healing over chaos, clarity over confusion, growth over comfort. You're winning, and you don't need anyone's applause to validate that. The way you feel when you look in the mirror, the way you breathe deeper, stand taller, love yourself more fiercely, That's the reward. That's the victory. Keep rising. Keep choosing you. You're no longer who you were. And that's the point. When you stop trying to be chosen, you start choosing yourself. And that single decision holds more power than every moment you spent waiting. Because choosing yourself isn't just a mindset. It's a shift in energy, in identity, in direction. You no longer ask who will stay. You ask what you need to grow. That shift removes confusion. It silences the noise. It ends the need to keep looking back for signs that someone finally saw your worth. You already see it. You already feel it. And when that truth sinks in, your presence changes everything. People sense when you've stopped needing them. They feel it in your tone, in your timing, in the way you no longer carry the emotional weight of their absence. And that's what creates the deepest impact. Not rejection, not revenge, but release. When you no longer resist the ending, you become open to beginnings far greater than what you thought you lost. That openness, that calm confidence, that peace they never gave you, that's the new energy surrounding you now. You're no longer someone who waits for closure. You become the closure. And not because you're cold, not because you've stopped caring, but because you finally care enough about yourself to stop holding space for what no longer fits. Growth demands room. And the more you grow, the less you can carry people who refuse to grow with you. That's not abandonment. That's alignment. You're choosing what serves your evolution, not your ego. You're letting go of old versions of love that were rooted in proving, performing, or pleasing, because you finally understand that real love doesn't require you to abandon yourself. And if it does, it's not love. It's attachment disguised as connection. You've done the work. You've sat with the pain. You've looked at the hard truths. You've stopped distracting yourself with temporary comfort. And now everything in you is shifting. From wounded to wise, from desperate to grounded, from lost to found. You no longer need to be rescued. You've rescued yourself. And that kind of healing builds an unshakable core, a presence that doesn't chase, a light that doesn't dim to be accepted. Let them wonder where the old version of you went. Let them feel the silence that used to be filled with effort. Let them sit in the space you used to overextend to fill. That's not punishment. That's the balance being restored. That's what happens when you stop living on borrowed worth and start living from your own inner source. You've crossed the line between hoping and knowing, between waiting and becoming. You're not the same, and you never will be. Because once you choose yourself deeply, completely, without hesitation or apology, you step into a life where you're no longer at the mercy of who stays or who goes. You become the one who leads, who decides, who creates. You stop chasing closure and start embodying it. That is the power they never expected, and it's yours now. You're not rebuilding yourself to impress the past. You're rebuilding because your future demands it. The version of you that still sought closure, still waited for clarity, still felt tied to old stories, can't survive where you're going. That version operated on fear, on doubt, on a belief that peace came from someone else deciding your value. But that illusion has shattered. And what's left now is the truth. You are the one who gives meaning to your life. You are the one who creates the standard. And no one gets to define that but you. Every time you choose growth over comfort, you move closer to your true self. The self that doesn't settle. The self that doesn't apologize for evolving. The self that no longer tries to be digestible to stay loved. You begin to understand that not everyone was meant to go with you. Some people were only meant to show you what you needed to wake up, or not to destroy you, but to redirect you. And that redirection wasn't rejection, it was realignment. You don't heal by going back, you heal by building forward. They won't recognize you, and that's the point. You're no longer speaking the language of need. You're fluent in boundaries now, in presence, in purpose. You used to overextend just to feel chosen. Now you choose yourself so completely, there's no room left to chase. You've stopped editing your energy just to be accepted. That kind of change can't be undone. It lives in your tone, in your eyes, in the way you protect your peace without guilt. This is what it means to become. You don't make noise, you move in truth. You let your actions speak, not from ego, but from alignment. You've stepped into the version of you who no longer fears the silence because you filled it with strength. The emotional space they once occupied has become sacred. It's no longer a shrine to what was lost. It's the foundation for everything you're building. You're no longer stuck in memories. You're rooted in momentum. Let them remember you the way they left you. Let that version live in their mind, because who you are now is no longer seeking their recognition. You're not the echo of a past relationship. You're the voice of your own rise. And no amount of delay, denial, or distance can undo what you've become. You've earned this peace. You've earned this clarity. And now you walk with a knowing that can't be shaken. You don't have to explain your absence. Your energy says enough. The silence they used to take for granted has transformed into something powerful, something they can feel, something they can't reach. Not because you're hiding, but because you've risen so far beyond who you were, they no longer recognize the air you breathe. That is the mark of real evolution. Not louder, not harder, just higher. Keep rising. Keep choosing peace. They won't see it coming, but it's already here. You don't owe anyone the old version of yourself. Not the one who tolerated less. Not the one who kept silent, not the one who showed up for people who never truly showed up for you. That version served a purpose. It taught you. It helped you survive. But you're not here to survive anymore. You're here to thrive. And thriving demands a different energy, an energy that no longer operates out of fear or lack. You're no longer living in response to rejection. You're living in alignment with your rebirth. This is the season of no longer asking for permission. You don't need someone's approval to outgrow what broke you. You don't need someone's validation to believe that you deserve better. And you certainly don't need someone's attention to feel seen. You've learned how to see yourself. You've learned how to hear your own voice above the noise. And that voice, it's calm, it's clear, it's powerful. It doesn't scream, it doesn't beg, it doesn't prove. It simply knows. And that knowing is what makes you unshakable. The shift didn't happen overnight. It happened the moment you got tired of betraying yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. It happened the moment you realized that peace is more important than potential. That emotional safety is more powerful than temporary passion. You stopped being addicted to highs and started building a life on truth. That is how the healing began. Quietly, without announcement, without applause. Just a quiet decision to no longer be available for anything that dishonors your growth. They don't need to understand. They don't need to agree. This journey is between you and your soul has waited long enough. Waited for you to stop settling, waited for you to stop performing, waited for you to finally walk away from the idea that being chosen by someone else was the goal. It never was. The goal was always to remember who you are without their lens clouding your reflection. You're not just healing from a broken relationship, you're healing from every moment you said yes when your spirit whispered no. You're healing from every time you watered yourself down to be accepted. That kind of healing isn't pretty. It's raw, it's uncomfortable, but it's real. And real healing leaves nothing the same. It reshapes your standards. It rewires your responses. It reclaims your power. Until one day you look in the mirror and no longer see someone who's waiting. You see someone who's choosing. This is what they didn't expect. Not that you'd move on, but that you'd evolve. That you'd find peace so deep it makes your absence feel louder than any words ever could. You don't chase anymore because you've realized that what's meant for you won't require you to abandon yourself to keep it. You no longer cling to old doors because you trust what's ahead. That trust, that quiet, grounded, unwavering trust is your revenge, and it's the kind they'll never see coming. Some people will only understand your worth after they've lost access to it. But by then, you'll be long gone. Not physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. The version of you that once waited for breadcrumbs, that once felt empty without their attention, is gone. You've outgrown the need for external permission to feel whole. You've stopped orbiting around people who only valued your presence when it served their ego. Now you move differently, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity, and that clarity is rare, it's quiet, it's powerful. It doesn't need to be loud to be heard. They might still be expecting you to fold, to reach out, to explain yourself. But you've closed that chapter with grace, not noise, and the silence they now hear isn't emptiness. It's everything you used to give them reclaimed. You're not punishing anyone. You're simply no longer negotiating your peace. You've realized that closure isn't about getting answers. It's about choosing peace when chaos wants to pull you back in. And you've made your choice. That's where the real power lives. Your presence used to be easy to access because your heart was wide open, hoping they'd see the good in you. But now, your heart is still open. It's just no longer unguarded. You've learned that love isn't about sacrificing yourself for someone's potential. It's about being seen, respected, valued as you are. No more explaining your worth. No more proving your loyalty. No more accepting almost. If it costs your peace, it's too expensive. If it dims your light, It's not love. This isn't about revenge. It's about realignment. You're no longer trying to rewrite a broken story. You're writing a new one. And this story doesn't start with "I hope they come back." It starts with "I finally came back to myself." Every time you stopped texting first, every time you held your boundary, every time you chose solitude over confusion, you were choosing yourself. That's not weakness. That's healing. That's what it looks like when someone finally understands their own power. They don't have to see it now. They don't have to wake up. The story doesn't require their participation anymore. Because it's not about them. It never really was. It was always about the parts of you that needed to be seen by you. It was about the belief that you weren't enough unless someone stayed. But now you see it clearly. Your enoughness was never up for debate. It was only waiting for you to stop outsourcing it. This energy you're stepping into, it doesn't chase, it doesn't beg, it doesn't explain. It simply exists, fully, boldly, without apology. And the ones who truly see you will never need to be convinced. They'll recognize your strength without you having to shrink to fit. This is the new you, rooted, whole, unavailable for anything that doesn't match the standard you've now set. They won't see it coming, but you will because you built it. One boundary at a time, one healed wound at a time, one quiet, unstoppable choice at a time. When you stop chasing, everything shifts. You begin to realize how much of your energy was spent running toward people who were walking away. You start to see how often you gave more than you received, hoping that love could be earned through self-sacrifice. But now, you're different. You're no longer investing in people who only show up when it's convenient. You're no longer romanticizing inconsistency or labeling chaos as chemistry. You've chosen stability over fantasy, self-respect over validation. And that choice changes everything. You've stepped out of the cycle. The one where you questioned your worth every time someone withdrew. The one where silence made you spiral and mixed signals made you wait. That version of you, so eager to be chosen, so afraid to let go, is now your proof of how far you've come. You don't entertain confusion anymore. If someone wants access to you, they have to show up fully. No more half effort, no more emotional crumbs, because you finally believe you deserve more than just being someone's maybe. You've become someone who doesn't fear solitude. You embrace it. You use it. You let it refine you. You've stopped filling your time just to escape your thoughts. Now you listen to them, you sit with them, you let them speak, not to judge, but to understand. And in doing so, you've built a relationship with yourself that no one can interrupt. That kind of inner stability is rare. It doesn't scream, it doesn't boast, it simply radiates, and when others feel it, they notice. They feel the boundary, the depth, the peace. People who once mistook your kindness for weakness now feel the distance. Not because you hate them, but because you finally love yourself enough to protect your energy. You used to over-explain, over-apologize, overextend just to keep people close. But now, you simply let go. Not with anger, but with awareness. You've learned that losing people who can't meet you where you are isn't loss. It's alignment, it's clarity. It's space for those who can meet you with presence, intention, and truth. Your silence has become sacred. Not cold, not bitter, just selective. You no longer rush to respond, to explain, to be understood. You allow misunderstandings to exist without it shaking your sense of self. You know who you are now. You've stopped seeking closure in conversations that only reopen wounds. You've started closing chapters without needing someone else to co-sign your healing. That's the kind of strength that isn't taught, it's earned. And now, you're magnetic. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you've stopped trying at all. You simply are. Grounded, whole, unavailable for drama, attracted to peace, focused on growth. You walk into every space with calm confidence, not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer need perfection to feel powerful. They'll feel the shift. They may not say it out loud, but they'll notice. And while they're still trying to figure out what happened, you'll already be gone, living the life you once begged them to be part of. You no longer fear being misunderstood, because you finally understand yourself. You're no longer bending to make others comfortable while suffocating your truth. That old habit of shrinking to stay acceptable has been buried. You've outgrown it. Now, your energy speaks first. You walk into spaces knowing your value, not hoping someone will notice it. That's the kind of self-respect that can't be taken, only recognized. You're no longer auditioning for love. You've remembered that you were always the prize, not in arrogance, but in quiet certainty. And when that shift happens, everything changes. You stop chasing. You stop begging. You stop over-explaining to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Not because you've become cold, but because you've become whole. You've realized that your peace is sacred, and not everyone deserves access to it. You've stopped asking people to show up for you who were never built to hold your weight. And that's freedom. That's clarity. That's evolution. When you release the fantasy of what someone could be, you make room for what actually aligns. No more loving potential. No more staying for promises. You now live in reality, present, powerful, and unshakable. There's something magnetic about someone who no longer negotiates their worth. Someone who doesn't need to argue their value. Someone who simply walks away when respect leaves the room. That's who you're becoming. That's who you fought to become. And it wasn't easy. It took heartbreak, silence, loneliness, and rebuilding. But through it all, you never fully broke. You bent, you cracked, you fell, but you rose. And every time you rose, you became more aligned with the version of you that doesn't settle. Not for attention, not for validation, not for fear of being alone. Now, you're rooted. You're no longer shaken by distance. You don't crumble when someone pulls away. You don't feel desperate to fix what isn't yours to repair. You simply observe. You stay still. You let the silence speak. Because you've learned that who stays silent with you matters more than who breaks the silence first. You've stopped being addicted to chaos and started craving peace. And that peace, it's not empty, it's powerful. It's the loudest statement you've ever made. You don't need to announce your growth. You are the announcement. Every boundary you hold, every standard you enforce, every time you choose peace over performance, you remind the world that you are no longer available for anything less than truth. They won't see it coming. They'll expect the old you, the one who tolerated, who overgave, who kept the door open. But that version is gone. And what's replaced it is something stronger, softer, and far more secure. You're not hard, you're healed. You're not distant, you're discerning. You're not passive, you're powerful. And now, the only energy you entertain is the kind that reflects the level you've finally claimed. Quietly, unapologetically, completely. They thought your silence meant surrender, but it meant strength. They assumed your absence was weakness, but it was your greatest power. Because you finally realize sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. Not in anger, not in ego, but in clarity. You stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped offering your energy where it was ignored. And instead of chasing closure, you became it. That's not detachment, that's emotional mastery. And now, you're not just letting go, you're letting go with purpose. You're not unavailable because you're bitter. You're unavailable because you're focused. You're unavailable to anything that pulls you back into who you used to be. That old cycle of proving your worth, waiting for reciprocation, questioning your intuition. It no longer fits the life you're building. You've chosen elevation over repetition. And that decision doesn't just heal you, it protects your future. When you stop entertaining what drains you, you create space for what fuels you. You are no longer chasing love that requires you to abandon yourself in the process. That kind of love isn't love. It's dependency masked as connection. And you've finally outgrown it. You've realized your time is sacred. You no longer pour it into empty hands or scattered hearts. You know the difference now between someone who's unsure and someone who's unavailable. You've stopped trying to earn a place in someone's life and started honoring your own presence. You walk with a deeper calm now. Because you've stopped looking for signs and started listening to patterns. You've stopped begging for consistency from people who only offer chaos. And you've learned that peace is not found in someone's return. It's found in your refusal to return to what broke you. This new version of you does not chase. This version doesn't panic when someone pulls away. It observes, it waits, it watches, and most importantly, it remembers. You've trained yourself to stop reacting emotionally to emotional games. You don't play small to keep the peace. You don't lower your standards to keep people around. You're not afraid of someone losing interest because you're too busy investing in yourself. The energy that once went into fixing others now fuels your own growth. And that shift is undeniable. You've become magnetic not by being louder, but by being more still. Your silence is no longer the absence of words. It's the presence of strength. People feel it. They notice. They remember how easy it was to take you for granted. But now, you're not even reachable in the same way. You're not angry. You're just elevated. And from this new place, everything looks different. The games are clearer. The patterns are louder. And the truth is simpler. You're no longer participating in emotional tug-of-wars. You've stepped off the battlefield entirely. And now, without even trying, you've become what they never expected, powerful, poised, and completely untouchable. You stopped seeking permission to be whole. You stopped waiting for someone to confirm that your feelings were valid. You stopped hoping they'd see your worth after all this time. That moment when you chose yourself, not as a reaction, but as a decision, that was the beginning of everything. That was when the shift began, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, deeply, and permanently, because something inside you snapped back into alignment. The part of you that had been begging to be seen finally looked in the mirror and said, "I see you." And that changed everything. You no longer crave the illusion of closeness when it costs you your peace. You don't cling to almosts, maybes, or someday. You live in truth now. And the truth is this: if someone has to lose you to realize your value, they were never ready to hold it. You're not punishing them with silence. You're protecting yourself with standards. You've replaced longing with discernment, replaced pain with power. And now, the version of you that once bent over backwards for scraps is nowhere to be found. Not because you're hiding, because you've risen. You don't argue with people about your worth anymore. You don't try to educate someone on how to treat you. You've stopped performing for love. Now you stand still, confident, grounded. You've realized that real love doesn't need convincing, respect doesn't need reminding, and loyalty doesn't need to be chased. When someone truly values you, their actions match their words, and until that alignment appears, you remain at peace, not in punishment, but in purpose. You've learned how to sit with yourself, not out of loneliness, but out of power. Solitude used to feel like rejection. Now it feels like restoration. You've realized how much noise you used to tolerate just to avoid being alone. But now you choose silence because it centers you. You've realized your own presence is not something to be escaped. It's something to be honored. And in that stillness, you discovered something even more powerful than no contact. You found connection, not to someone else, but to yourself. That's what they didn't see coming. Not your silence, not your distance, but your transformation. They expected a reaction, a breakdown, another cycle. But instead, you evolved. You grew, you healed, quietly, on your own. And now, when they reach back, they won't find the same version they left. They'll meet someone new, someone whole, someone who doesn't negotiate with disrespect, who doesn't chase closure, who doesn't confuse intensity with intimacy. You no longer need them to return to prove your value. You prove it to yourself daily, in the way you live, the way you walk, the way you don't look back. You've turned pain into power, confusion into clarity, and waiting into walking forward. And now, you don't have to block them. Your growth already did. You don't need revenge. Your peace is the proof. You don't need to explain. Your energy speaks louder than words ever could.